So this meeting here is on conservatorship and guardianship. Make sure you're in the right room. You're not expecting something other than that topic. So my name is Mark Freese. I run the Merrill Lynch Special Needs Group in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. And this is my friend and colleague, Matt Bogan, who runs his own law firm. Matt's firm does special needs trusts, guardianships, and other legal things like wills and powers of attorney and things like that. So today we're going to talk first about guardianship. Matt's going to start that off, and then I'm going to finish up with conservatorship. So with that said, Matt Bogan.
So when people turn 18, they become legal adults. And as you probably know, there are a lot of people who are 18 with special needs who can't fulfill all the responsibilities of being an adult. So there's a process through the courts in which people can apply for guardianship of the person with disability. In Maryland, there's guardian of the person and guardian of the property. In the Virginia and the district, there's a guardian and then there's a conservator. So we don't want to get the terms mixed up. Guardian of the property and conservator is the same thing, and Mark's going to talk about that. I'm going to talk mostly about what's guardian of the person or just guardian in Maryland. So the process is triggered by filing in court, and each of the different courts, each of the different jurisdictions have slightly different requirements, but you start with the court and you apply to the court and say, I want to be this person's guardian, and here's why. And then there are different, in Maryland, you need 2 certificates from people saying the person needs a guardian. In the district, it's not, you can file without, but then they do an evaluation. And in Virginia, there's a certificate that you need to file. Now, guardianship is a somewhat controversial area because when someone is appointed a guardian for someone else, the person with disability loses rights. And it's some people view it as not a normalization model because when what a friend of mine calls plain kids turn 18, they become adults. And it's paternalistic and it's oppressive. And I don't disagree with some of those assessments, but in my view, in terms of the practicality, I think it's really important. And I don't think that in most circumstances that the alternatives of powers of attorney and other documents work as well. So, do you have a question? We're going to take some questions and then we'll save some for the end. So you apply to the court. The court appoints, in all circumstances, an attorney to represent the person with disability, separate from your lawyer. In Virginia, there's also routinely a guardian ad litem appointed can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. That doesn't happen so much on this side of the river. And then there's a hearing at which the court determines whether the person needs a guardian and if the person does need a guardian, who the guardian should be. So it sounds like, and most of the time, it's a pretty cut and dry process, but there are all kinds of wrinkles that occur. You know, sometimes in divorce families, it becomes the second or the third round of the custody battle. With older people, sometimes it's a fight about money. So, you know, as I said, many times it's cut and dry, but not always. So who should use the process? When we're talking about kids who are turning 18, in Maryland, it's whether they can make or communicate responsible decisions concerning their health, safety, and welfare. You know, I think that if you have a child with special needs, you have to consider it. it's, it's important. And it's important, I think, for healthcare, if nothing else, because HIPAA causes a big problem with folks. Everybody know what HIPAA is? Okay. I have a client who has a child with pretty severe disabilities who runs a hospital, and we were talking about whether we should do guardianship or not. And I said, what do you tell your people about HIPAA? And you tell them that if they're 18, we can't talk about it. He said, now I know that people don't necessarily follow that, but that's what we tell them. So if that's what they're telling them, you need to have the ability to get medical information and be able to make medical decisions. And for me, that outweighs pretty much everything. Yeah.
Even with the power of attorney, you won't be able to access the medical?
Well, okay, so there's two problems. The question, I'll repeat for the tape, was, can we do this with powers of attorney? Maybe. Okay, as a lawyer, I have to be assured that the person who signs a document understands the document. So that presents some problems. And then those documents can always be revoked. So I've had the situation with families who have children with emotional issues. They sign the document and then they say, I don't want you to do that. So, it always comes up when there's, the only time that you need this is when there's an emergency, right? And you want to make sure that when there's an emergency, things are tied up. So theoretically, yes. I'm not quite as optimistic that it always works. And then sometimes you get, well, they signed it in 1986, well, where they signed it 10 years ago, how do we know it's still valid? And you just run into a bunch of problems. Yes?
There's a question, maybe everybody else got it. You said HIP.
HIPAA?
HIPAA.
HIPAA.
Yeah.
It's a federal law that protects medical privacy, or supposed to protect medical privacy. Gets complied with more or less. But, the story I always tell is I had a client whose granddaughter needed a sedated MRI, and the only place in the area that would do it was Children's Hospital, and they wouldn't touch her without a guardianship order. Yeah.
Well, can a guardian be just a single person, or it can be more than one person, like me and my wife?
Yes, it can. The question is, does a guardian have to be one person, or can it be more? It certainly can be the two parents.
Now, how old should the child be before you apply for it? How long is the process?
Okay, where do you live?
Rockville.
Okay, so I'll see if this gets as good a laugh. On the child's 18th birthday, you don't have a party, you apply for guardianship and SSI. Okay? You can't apply before the 18th birthday. You can apply on the 18th birthday.
Or after.
Or after. Okay? And the same with SSI, but, so.
Is there a limit? So let's say, is it between 18 and 20, or 18 and 22, or 18 and whatever?
Whenever.
18 and whatever.
I did one for somebody who was 50-something the other day. Because he lived with the parents, and they died, and, people will slide a little bit with the parents, but not so much with the siblings. So I had to go get the sister appointed as a guardian. So 18 is the start, is the start line. You can do it. It's the same process as for people in nursing homes who can't take care of themselves.
So apart from parents, for example, can siblings be also included in that type of a setup?
Not initially.
Okay.
Siblings, the parents could not do it, and the siblings could. But in my experience, they won't let the parents and a sibling or two do it. The question is, I guess I should have repeated it, is can siblings do it with parents? And the answer is, if the parents say they don't want to do it, then the siblings can step in. There's a priority in most places. Okay? Anything else? Okay, we're going to let Mark talk, but I have to stand next to him because I've got the mic.
I have a loud voice. Go ahead. Yes.
Approximately how much would the cost be for getting the guardianship, completing it?
Right, it depends. It depends on where you live, it depends on the person's disability, it depends on other factors. So it just,
Even not a ballpark number?
no.
I can tell you,
Certainly-
I got one for my son. It was $1,500. I'll just tell you. And he was
That's a reasonable ballpark,
Yeah.
except in the district it costs a little bit more.
And ours was simple. It was very easy. Go in front of the court. You're there for like 5 minutes. And there was I live in Virginia, so there was a guardian ad litem. So there was an attorney for my son, Christopher. And so they would come and assess him and see what his home situation was and things like that, and make sure that the guardianship was appropriate. So, pretty simple.
Yeah,
Not hard
you-
at all.
I hope you didn't cover this already because I came in late, but is there an alternative to guardianship?
Okay. I don't think there are good alternatives to guardianship, despite what people say. I don't know if you were here when I told about my client whose granddaughter needed a sedated MRI, and mom was out of the picture. And so she took, the only place that would do a sedated MRI is Children's Hospital. And the district has a whole bunch of statutes on substituted consent and assisted decision-making and all the rest of that, and Children's Hospital said, you come back with a guardianship order and we'll do it. The other alternatives, I think I talked to this gentleman about, are powers of financial and healthcare powers of attorney. I'll repeat what I said. As a lawyer, I have to be sure that people understand the documents they're signing, and so that cuts down. And they can always be revoked. And I find that situation more with families who have children with emotional issues, but it can happen. And the other point on guardianship is you don't have to exercise all of your authority. I mean, it's just like when your kid's 17 and a half, you can let them make whatever decisions they want to make. You don't have to exercise all of your authority. But my experience is, it's always the emergency when you need the authority, and then you have it. Yes?
Question. Now, I don't know how severe your son is, but if you have a child that turns 18 and they're severe, they're on like a 2-year-old or like level, then you have to go through the same process.
Yep,
Although they can't sign anything.
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
They're-
Then you really have to go through the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the second part of the conversation is conservatorship. So conservatorship has to do with the money. Who's going to handle the money for your child? How you pick a conservator? How you look through your family, figure out who in your family is good with money. And so for a lot of families, that's hard. I know just doing legal documents, I always laugh with Matt. Some people don't get all their legal documents done because they can't figure out who would take all these roles on. And that's particularly true with a special needs child. There's a lot of work. Everybody raise your hand if it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, right? A lot of work. And you need to leave behind some roadmap for it. So on the same side, we're going to talk about conservatorship. I also like to talk about tools you can use to make it easy. So one of the tools is called a letter of intent. Has anybody heard of that before? A few people? So a letter of intent is basically just a non-legal document that you write down about things about your child that are going to help somebody take it over. So it might have to do with, you could talk about the money, how the money should be handled. You can talk about basic things, healthcare things. I always tell the story with my son when he was little, he had to take medication, and he didn't like the medication, and if you had a spoon with strawberry jam on it, he would take the medication. And if you didn't know that little trick, your life was not going to be good. So things like that, or if you have some sort of brace and you have skin breakdown because of that, and you need to make sure that that is taken care of, or who's the doctor you call for this particular thing. And so letter of intent, I just use a Word document for it, just kind of update it periodically. You can have it, with your will and your documents. My mom used to say, there's a box that has all your stuff in it. If I die, go here. So that would be a good place for it. But that'll help with the next generation or the next people that are taking over. So conservatorship, what is it? It's somebody that's going to handle the money. Why is it used? Because the child with special needs can't handle money on their own. And I always say in every family there's somebody with special needs. Matt joked about his twins, but my daughter is now 22. So yes, she could probably handle some money, but not a lot of money. So you're going to write down some rules on how that money is going to be spent. And then you're going to talk to them about investment decisions. So how should the money be invested? And how much do you really need for that child? So I'd like to give people ballparks so they kind of know what the goal might be. So if you do all your math and you figure out that your child needs $50,000 a year in income to be able to supplement what they have coming in from other government benefits, that means you need to have about $1 million in assets. So how many people have $1 million just laying around? Nope. So that's the hard part, is figuring out where that money is going to come from as a conservator, how you're going to get that created. So in many cases, it's done through insurance. And so we'll talk just briefly about that, because that makes sure that it happens. So insurance, nothing can happen. The market can't affect it. Interest rates can't affect it. Bad investments can't affect it. We had a gentleman earlier that talked about most of his money was in real estate. Real estate can be volatile. You don't know what's going to happen with real estate. So insurance, for sure that money is going to come due at some point when that person dies. And that money would then go into that special needs trust. So I like that method a lot because it's for sure, it's definitely going to happen. The type of insurance that you have would be something that's permanent. So when you hear about insurance, term insurance lasts for a certain period of time, so that wouldn't work. It'd have to be something that's permanent. And it would have to be set up so that the money would then go into that special needs trust that you probably heard about some other talks. And the best way to do it is to do it on both lives, the husband and the wife if you're married, because it's less expensive that way. And they call that type of policy a second to die policy, because it actually doesn't kick in or start paying out until both parents are gone. So it's about 30% less expensive. But the beauty of the whole program is that once you've done it that way, you know for sure that money is going to be there. And it doesn't cost you $1 million for it, it costs you something substantially less. And you know that $1 million will be there for your child. So that's one good way to do it.
Excuse me,
yes?
You had said that a term life policy is not good. So are you talking about a whole life policy?
It would be a whole life policy. It would be a permanent type policy, yes.
Does all insurance companies have it, or is it special insurance companies?
It's a good question. Most insurance companies would have it, but that is a good question, and they're all a little different. So in our practice, as an example, we use about 30 different insurance carriers. We do the evaluation, so we kind of have them bid on it and see what would be best for your situation. And every insurance company views health situations differently. So yes, there's lots of research that goes into it before. And it takes a while to get. In our practice, I always say 6 months is how long. When you come in, you say, I want it between that time and when you get it. So it takes a while. Because you have to go to all your doctors, get all your records, and all that sort of stuff. So common investment mistakes for a conservator to make would be, having all your money in one place. My mom said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Making sure that the portfolio for your child is diversified. And expenses are important. So how many people here own mutual funds? A few? Okay. How many people here own indexes or know what indexes are? One person. I like you. That's good. So indexes are a lot less expensive, way less expensive. So part of it in this whole planning process as a conservator is you need to make sure the money lasts for the entire lifetime of that child. And so mutual funds generally can have expenses from 1.5% to 2%, where an index may have an expense of like 0.2% or 0.3%. So it doesn't sound like a huge difference, but over a long period of time, it's a big, big difference. So making sure your investment expenses are low is important. The other thing that's important is the person knows what they're doing. So how many people know what a fiduciary is, or heard the word? So it's been in the paper almost every day now for like 5 months. So it's really a good thing. Fiduciary means that the person that's handling the money has to put their needs behind their client. So their client's needs are going to come first. And so it's the highest standard in our industry that you have. And it's important that whoever's handling the money, in my opinion, acts as a fiduciary. So they're looking after the needs of you and your child to make sure the money is invested the right way. The other part about it is right now for special needs trusts, a typical investment would be something in the area of conservative things like CDs, money market accounts, things like that. So as a conservator, you have to think about, is that going to make enough money to meet the needs of that particular child? And right now, interest rates are very, very low. So your money market account right now is paying like point nothing, right? CD's paying not much at all either. So that makes it more difficult. And especially when you're planning for this long lifetime, because you're planning for a child, that's a lot of years to cover. And so you want to make sure it's invested the right way. So as example, in our practice, we don't use a lot of those fixed income vehicles because they're not paying very much. But we use indexes, low-cost indexes, and those indexes would be in dividend-oriented type investments. So they're paying, 2.5%, 3% in income, and you're only asking for 5%. That's why I told you that $1 million creates $50,000 in income. So the stock market just has to do a couple percentage points a year, and you're fine. So something diversified, low cost, and in things that you think will produce the income that your child would need. So I'm going to end it with that because most of these sessions, the best part about it are questions. So anybody have any questions on guardianship or conservatorship or anything else about their child in the special needs area?
I missed it. For the insurance, permanent whole life insurance, is that for the child or for the parent?
So the policy would be on the parent. And the assumption is that you're going to be able to take care of your child financially while you're living. So the biggest fear for every family member that I've ever talked to is when we're gone, what's going to happen with our kid? That's the worry. And so what's going to happen when you're gone is that policy is then going to pay out tax-free into the special needs trust that you've developed through a lawyer. And then that trust is then going to have the assets to be able to earn income, and that income can be used by your child or adult, for their lifetime, for expenses. So that's how it works. Yes?
So to set up a conservator, do you just include that in your letter of intent or your will, or is that something you need to?
Okay, so hopefully you won't need, Mark was kind of using conservator and trust and fiduciary and putting it all together. Conservators are appointed by the court when somebody with a disability has money and frankly it wasn't planned for correctly, because mostly everybody should have a trust for their disabled child. Now, the principles on investing the money are the same, but there's no court supervision. So, you can either set up the trust in your will, or I like to do them now so that they're in existence, but that's a stylistic view. Well, there's some substance behind that, but so conservatorship is what happens when there's an insurance policy that names the disabled child or disabled adult personally, and the court's got to supervise it or things like that. But if you do it right, you don't have that.
So you should have the trust if you want to buy the insurance and have it all set up in the special needs as who you want to invest it.
Yes.
All of that.
Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, with the insurance, you need to have the special needs trust already drawn up. So that's the first question I ask. Do you have a special needs trust? If they say no, then I say, why not? Because you have a child with special needs. And then we have a conversation about it. So then you get the lawyer to draft up the document. It doesn't take that long.
Depends on how busy somebody is,
Okay.
but no, it doesn't take that long. Just kidding.
He's very good. Takes a long time with him. He's got too many clients. But
No.
you could get it done in a month. You'd have it completed, and then that's going to be where the money goes. The other part about that, which is a good question, is you got to make sure everybody else knows that. So in special needs families, a lot of times you're going to have family members that want to help your child out. At least that's how it is in our family. And so you need to make sure all those people know that, hey, this money needs to go into the special needs trust. And you need to make sure all your documents say that too. So even if you've done your will and you've done medical care directives and all the things that Matt can help you with, there are certain assets that pass outside of your will. So your IRA account passes outside of your will. Your 401k account passes outside of your will. Insurance policies pass outside of your will. So it's really important we sit down with clients to make sure all those documents, if the money's going to go to that special needs child, say that, you know, ABC Child Special Needs Trust rather than something else. So beneficiary designations are very, very important.
Yeah, we can't emphasize that enough, okay? I have a case where mom and dad were divorced but friendly, and dad was an alcoholic, and everybody knew dad was an alcoholic, including the agent who sold the policy, and the agent who sold the policy let him name his 2 minor children. So minor children and adult disabled people kind of get treated the same. Named his 2 minor children as beneficiaries, and they live in the district, and the court supervision is just impossible. So you got to make sure the beneficiary designations are the way they should be. And you know, I make people, when we sign their wills and trusts, bring in their beneficiary designations forms so we can do it, because most people, I don't know, in your experience, more people have more money in retirement accounts than anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, sir.
But the beneficiary has to be the special needs trust?
yes.
Oh.
The reason for that is that that trust is a separate entity, and that means that your child will still receive government benefits, so Social Security and Medicaid benefits, so really, really important that they're eligible for that. So, and if they receive money outside of that and directly in their name, more than $2,000, you lose those benefits or they're suspended. So you don't want that. So that planning is very, very important.
You got to, yeah.
Thank you. I work in Montgomery County, and I advise individuals about the Medicaid waiver process, and a lot of the time I have families looking at me, where do I collect this money for attorney fees to initiate guardianship? How would you advise a family to go about pro bono services in Maryland or Virginia?
Well, I think that the court has some resources where, you know, there's the Montgomery County Bar. If you're Montgomery County, there's the Bar Association. You know, some people do 1 or 2 for free. So there are some resources. And if they have no money, then the child's attorney gets paid by the state of Maryland. So they only have to worry about getting their attorneys.
That's how it was for my son Christopher. He has no money. So, you know, we had a guardian ad litem, and they were paid by the state. It's in Virginia.
Yeah, in Maryland, it's a little different. If the parents have money, they have to pay. But if they're looking for pro bono, then the state will pay for the child's attorney.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
When you go to fund a special needs trust with the parents' insurance, what about if some of us are starting late and, you know, we have health problems or something of that type? How do you get affordable insurance to fund these special needs trusts?
So that's a tough one. And so, you know, I'm doing talks now in preschools because you need to start early. And it would be the same thing I would tell you if you're trying to do financial planning and you're trying to make sure you're okay, because if the parents aren't okay, then their child's not okay financially. And so you need to start as early as possible. And so in your case, if there's bad health, you could probably still get some insurance, but not as much. Or and some is better than none. Or it may be the case that you can get insurance, but it's going to be more expensive. Or it may be that there's other ways. I do a whole seminar on finding gold for special needs families, which is to figure out where is all the money? How do you figure out where to get it from? And so some of it might just be hidden. I mean, you have like a 401k at work, or you have some insurance policies through work that you can get. That would help. Other family members would help. The lady in the back talked about waiver programs, so there's other funding sources, so your child might not need as much if you've done some housing waivers and things like that. So there's lots of tools. You know, I do financial planning, but I really call myself a connector. Almost every day I connect somebody with somebody else. I've done this for almost 30 years. So if you have money issues and you're not sure where to get it, my cards are back there and I can show you some sources. And then the other part, there are grants from some nonprofits that are available. I'm on the board, example of Autism Society of Northern Virginia. We give out what we call mini grants. So it's not a lot of money, but it's some money to cover expenses and things like that. So there's lots of places to go.
And some, like Mark said, something's better than nothing.
Right.
Right. I mean, I'm being serious. You know, I understand. I have clients of all ages, you know, and they're not going to, they can't afford to buy $1 million second to die policy, but they can afford to buy 100,000 or 250. You know, I wouldn't want to say every little bit helps. That's because that's not a little bit. It's, you know, that's real money, and it helps. So, you know, you just have to. And the other thing about life insurance is they'll pretty much sell it to you. If you can get through underwriting, they'll sell it to you any way you want to pay it. You want to pay it up front. You want to pay it for the rest of your life. You want to do it, whatever.
Yes.
I heard you saying that you have, you put your card back there, guy.
Okay.
You were talking about, things for the trust and if the parents not here, and you said something that perked me up. You said grants. Is there any way you can get grants like now if the child has special needs and they need maybe a special type of stroller or a special type of bed? Okay.
So you just go get my card and email me. So I'm on a number of different boards, but Autism Society of Northern Virginia gives out mini grants for that
Do I have
purpose.
to be in Virginia? I have property in Virginia though.
I'll let you figure that one out. I don't think you have to be in Virginia to qualify for it, but I'm actually on the review board that goes through all the applications, so they have money. ARC has money, ARC of Northern Virginia, and ARC of Maryland has money. So all kinds of different sources for money. And then there's also sources for waivers, so which you should be on the list. How many people are, how many waivers are? How many people are on the list now? Okay. The list is long. In Virginia, it's like 7 years long. So when I meet a family, the first thing I say is, if you're not on the list, get on the list, like yesterday. Because that's a source of funds to cover all different types of needs. Respite care, housing. Okay, this is not a subject for today's conversation.
Is your child 18?
No.
Okay.
16 in August.
Okay. So at 18, Medicaid pays for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're waiting for.
Yeah.
Well, I understand. I mean, so,
Yeah.
you know.
She has health insurance, it's just so much.
Right, but Medicaid pays for things that health insurance doesn't pay for.
Yeah.
Okay.
And speaking of, anybody,
Other questions?
other questions? I also have a handout in the back that if you haven't gotten and you have trouble sleeping, it'll.
My cards are in the back. I also have a table out there, so if you want to get information on other subjects like ABLE, the letter of intent, a special needs calculator to figure out how much it might cost for your child. We have a workbook that kind of figures out how you can do it on your own to figure out what the expenses might be. So that's all. There's a sign up sheet on my table. You can sign up there and I'll send it to you.
Cards out there?
My
Yeah.
cards are in the back. Yeah. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.